And do not stop that record on John's phone, and don't worry if it gets lots of extra stuff.
All right.
So what's the story? Are we ready to go? Are both things recording?
Yeah, all three are on.
All three are recording?
And there's a chip
Yeah,
in there.
okay. And there's a chip?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just make a sound here. You can see me on all three cameras now, right? All right.
Good.
That's
Jeff
it.
Galvin interview, take one.
One
Jeff.
and only.
Jeff, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today for this interview.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.
As you know, I co-founded the Association for Enterprise Growth to help business owners grow their businesses, build personal wealth, and exit on their terms. All right, Morgan, we're going to have to,
Let's start it
Let's
again
start
and get the
again.
door closed and get everything done. No distractions. Quiet on the set, which means nobody can be making noise or moving around because it's distracting. Okay? And you guys ready? Okay.
Jeff, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today for this interview. As you know, I co-founded the Association for Enterprise Growth.
Can you start again? Because I probably should say,
Okay.
yeah, my pleasure or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Okay.
Give me
Morgan,
a second.
Morgan told me that before.
Yeah.
I just didn't listen to her.
You can race right through, but whatever.
Okay. Jeff, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today for this interview.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. As you know, I co-founded the Association for Enterprise Growth to help business owners grow their business, build personal wealth, and exit on their terms. We hope that your success can inspire other business owners to do the same, and that those owners can learn something useful that they can apply to their business as they watch this interview. So, you ready to go?
I am.
All right. I know this is going to be the hardest question that you've ever had, but tell me about AGT in 60 seconds or less.
I can do that. So the reason that AGT is around is because there is a new drug development modality that has incredible power to cure things. And so the whole purpose of the company is to leverage that new drug development modality to cure things that used to be incurable or even untreatable, and to reduce suffering and reduce death from serious human diseases. And the technology is called gene and cell therapy.
Fantastic. And what inspired you to start the business?
Well, I was in retirement and getting bored, and I met somebody who showed me something called viral vectors. Viral vectors are quite simply repurposing viruses so that instead of bringing bad stuff into your body, they bring good stuff in, because viruses reprogram your DNA to do something bad, but it turns out we can now crack them open. We can scoop out the bad stuff and throw it away. It's like a little bit of software in there, actually, DNA or RNA. We can put new stuff in there that actually improves the operation of your cells and cures things. And so we're converting viruses into updates for your body.
How many diseases can this technology cure?
Well, you see, that's an interesting question. So I'll give you the simple answer, which is probably about 10,000 different diseases. All cancers, all monogenic diseases, all viruses, maybe everything. I don't know, yet. But we're at the beginning of this. It's sort of like asking the question when you see an IBM mainframe, what can this do? And then having the guy say to you, well, anything. I mean, eventually it'll be driving your car and flying your plane, right? And building everything for you, and it'll be in a tiny little package in your pocket, right? So it's going to take some time to get there, but that's the nature of technology, and tech has finally come to biotech. It really is now the main attribute of our company, is really a technological revolution that behaves a lot like computers. It doubles in capabilities every year while halving in cost. And what's possible in that environment? Anything. If you can dream it, you can do it.
It's sort of a Moore's law of biotechnology.
Exactly. Well, it's a Moore's law of technology in general. I mean, you go look at any technology, you see it follows something like that. Maybe the parameters change a little bit. Maybe biotech is going to be 4x and 1/4 in terms of efficacy and cost. But it means that these cures that we're making will start off expensive, like an IBM mainframe, and end up cheap, like a cell phone that's being carried around by some teenager in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Something that always interests me is the name of the company. Where did it come from? It seems kind of obvious, and how long did it take to actually come up with the name?
Actually, a lot of thought went into the name. I mean, one big part of naming a company right now is about finding the domain. But
Right.
there were a lot of things, I've named a lot of companies and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna make less mistakes on this one. So first of all, it describes the company pretty well. We're not a drug company, really. We're a technology company. So American Gene, we deal with genes, technologies. American puts you on the front of the alphabet, which is always good. And since we were doing a lot of business in China at the time, American was a brand there. And so, I thought that might lead to some good collaborations with drug companies in China that had money to help propel this. That never happened, but it didn't matter. I mean, the name has been good.
Fantastic. Tell me about an accomplishment that shaped your career.
Geez, I don't know where to start. I mean, my career has just been, moving forward and failing forward, for over 60 years now, I guess, since I started. At 5 years old, I was selling potting soil to the neighbors, by sifting dirt from our backyard while our house was being built, to teaching at MIT in my teens and Harvard in my teens and early 20s, to a career in Silicon Valley where I retired at age 42. But I would just say that the key thing that has driven me is passion for something, right? And when I saw computers, I just fell in love with them. And I think the reason that I fell in love with them is really my affection for humankind. That I saw that computers were going to get rid of a lot of the rote activities in life and be useful and beneficial to people's lives, like everybody's lives, right? And so I was very excited about that technology revolution. But I felt the exact same way when I learned about gene and cell therapy, when I realized that we can now change your DNA for better health. I was like, what can't we cure? And this is even bigger than my first love for computers.
So far at AGT, what's been your biggest success so far?
Surviving. I don't know if anybody can empathize with this, or I guess, recognize their journey and my journey, but business is ups and downs, and a growing business in a cutting edge technology, in crazy political and social times, delivers you a series of crises, right? And AGT for the last 15 years has been one crisis after another. And so I would say my biggest accomplishment here has been to think strategically in crisis instead of being consumed by fear and making those fears come true, because I think that's sort of like something that I've believed my whole life long, is that as soon as you start focusing on something, you will bring it to you. So you don't want to focus on your fears, you just want to characterize them and think strategically so that you can survive from one day to the next. Once you survive 15 years times 365 days, you get to the point where you're in a clinical trial for an HIV cure with a high probability of actually demonstrating that cure in the next 6 months. So that was my accomplishment, is to still be here, still pursuing the same thing.
So you've overcome these challenges for 15 years. What is the challenge that you're facing right now that's your biggest obstacle to overcome?
It's just bureaucracies, really. There will always be a question about whether the science will work. Okay, all the indications are that it will, but it can be wrong. You don't know it until you show it, right? That's the whole idea of clinical trials and science in general, right? It has to be repeatable. So we're going to get some fraction of these patients, between 0 over 7 of the patients that we've treated so far, up to 7 out of 7 of the patients that will have a gargantuan impact on our future. So what's the holdup? Well, the holdup is just that contracts need to be signed with clinical sites, various types of safety procedures need to be put in place. All the SOPs need to be signed off on. It's just like there's a ton of this stuff. But I got a great team that is dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, and actually just today we found out that the first site is ready to go. So we may be doing the next step, right? Because we've treated 7 patients. We just need to know when we pull them off their antiretrovirals, the standard treatment for HIV, for suppressing the virus, are they able to suppress it on their own with the modification that we made to their immune system? And the higher percentage of them that don't need antiretrovirals anymore, the closer we are to knocking this out totally. But if we were to get a third of them, 2 or even 3 of those patients in durable remission, that's it. HIV will be history. It's just a matter of time and bureaucracy to get to that point.
When do you think you'll know? When will you know that it's going to work or that it is working?
I think by the end of this year we will announce the results of the analytic treatment interruption, and that's that fraction, right?
Is there any way to know at this stage, like can you get any sort of preview as to what that result may be? Or do you just have to live with this for all of this time, which seems amazing to me?
Yeah, well, you have to have faith. You have to have faith, right? We talked about that earlier, that that there is a future to this thing. But there are a lot of signs along the way that give you, that sort of renew that faith. So what we have right now is what are called blood markers of efficacy. And so what we've seen is 7 out of 7 patients seem to be exhibiting a normal immune response against HIV pathogen in their bodies. That's, normal is far from average, right? Only 0.03% of people on the planet mount a normal immune response to their HIV, and we're getting 7 out of 7. That is giving me, a lot of optimism that we're going to see at least some of these patients in durable remission. That is called a functional cure, and functional cure really means equivalent to. That's a medical term, and that's what our goal is. And so, there's been various things along the way, but this blood marker data is just incredibly exciting to see. And yeah, it helps me to just hold on and wait patiently for the actual result.
Fantastic. And it seems...
Okay. Sorry to interrupt the folks. Something over here keeps going off. I don't know if y'all can hear it, but it's like...
The creep
Nope.
noise?
Yeah, what is that?
I'm not sure.
It's a
But
fan or
I
something,
built-
but it's not coming across on the
Okay.
audio.
Yeah.
And then, do you want to be holding that clipboard in the wide shot? Because you can see it on this one.
Is it bad?
No, it's
No,
not bad.
I mean, I just want to make sure that you don't.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
all right.
surprise-
It'd be weird if it disappears now,
Well,
unless you want to
I
start
mean,
from
well,
scratch.
That's what I was gonna say. Do we want to?
And I don't know what to do with my hands
Re-
anyway.
okay,
so
okay,
Yeah.
I think we're
Okay.
good.
This is way better than his other plan to pick his nose during the interview.
All right, so I'm sorry to
Comb my hair.
Sorry to interrupt the flow.
All right, no problem.
worries,
we're,
yeah.
we're beyond this one. I didn't.
Right, I know. I was trying to get you to a stopping point.
Yeah, keep going.
Don't worry.
And so we're good. 3, 2, 1. Jeff, I've been to AGT on a number of occasions, and one thing that stands out to me is the culture here. It just seems above normal, and the people seem to be really inspired, and I think let me start that over. Jeff, as I walk through the halls, I see that your employees they seem like they're on a mission. They seem upbeat. They seem, I don't know, the culture, you can tell, seems good. What do you attribute that to?
I think culture frequently just comes from the personalities of the people at the top, and you tend to be a natural filter for the folks that get excited about your company and about your idea, right? So, this is reminiscent of my time at Apple, right? Why did I go to Apple? Because they had a vision and a mission to bring computing to the world, which is something that I had believed in since I was in the 7th grade, right? And, so that idea appeals, right? So, and there's other elements to the culture that come from the personality elements of the leaders. But I think the big one is vision and mission. And we have a vision for 100 years of curing 10,000 diseases, and a mission to do that, right? And certain people, fall in love with that the same way that I fell in love with it and are energized by it the same way that I am. So, the vision, the mission, and just sort of the daily stuff that we put into the environment, like free lunches and a great set of benefits and mutual respect and a mantra of creativity and us trying to get everything out of every employee. We just want everybody on the team to contribute in any way that they can without limitations, without cubbyholing them or whatever. Okay, those elements are about getting the most out of your resources. I don't like to call humans resources because, it makes them sound like the electricity and the water, which they're exact opposite of that, right? The idea is that your most valuable thing are the people. So the culture is critically important. We think about it, but really, in some ways, it naturally occurs from the business that you've decided to go into and the way that you approach that and your own personality. And we've been very lucky, you're right. I mean, a lot of energized, passionate people running around making this possible.
So as a follow-up, you mentioned Apple, and Apple obviously had a vision and a mission, but the culture there, as I've read a number of biographies of Steve Jobs, wasn't what I see here. So did you learn something from the culture there that you changed when you built your businesses?
Well, so the vision and the mission, critically important, and being able to articulate that, which we called at Apple evangelism, and I still call it that here. I go out and, I preach a better idea. And some people get it and want to help propel that, and other people don't get it and they, drift off, which is just perfect. Now, we had the same thing at Apple, and, Steve Jobs was exceedingly young when he started that company, and think about how much you learn, in your 40s and 50s
Right.
and even 60s, right? That helps you to get the same effect with maybe a little less drama, and conflict, right? Now, all those things are absolutely inevitable in the environment, and I can't say that this environment is perfect, right? But I would say that we can be more thoughtful about how we interact with people, and I think that is beneficial vis-a-vis the early Apple days, or even the late Apple days. I suppose, there was, Steve still had a reputation of being, somebody who was pretty blunt, I'd say. I think forthrightness, openness, directness, all that stuff, that's part of our environment, but maybe with a little bit more, a little bit of respect and, kind of love mixed in there, right? I mean, we're doing this for people, and we are people.
Right.
We're the customers
Makes
too.
sense.
Yeah. So, our whole thing fits together really nicely. And so, yeah, I learned a lot from Apple, from being there. But I like to think of this company as being the software company for the next 90 years, right? And the last software company that really won the day in software for computers, and now we're software for your body, was Microsoft. And so we're really, in terms of a business model, we're mirroring them, learning a lot from their journey about platforms and efficiency and stuff like that. But that vision and mission-driven culture I really got from Apple, and so I like to think that we're Microsoft with the Apple attitude, and that we're trying to take everything positive that we can from both those companies.
Excellent. So let me shift to the future. Where do you see AGT in 5 years?
Well, I'm hoping that at the end of this year, we will have data that says that we have cured HIV. So we'll show first human efficacy, in which case we're currently making plans to spin HIV out as a separate company and take it public. And you could imagine that an HIV cure company would be the biggest company in the HIV space. And the HIV market is going to, right now it's $30 billion, but if you add cure to that, it's a $60 billion market. So that could be a huge pharma company that will be run in a very traditional way, and it will go ahead and depart the mothership, right? AGT, though, will go on to pursue cancer. That will be our, primary focus, and monogenic diseases and tools for monogenic diseases, of which there's 7,000 out there, and healthcare spends $2 to $4 trillion a year on palliative treatment for 7,000 monogenic diseases that are right in the wheelhouse of gene and cell therapy. We're going to make tools so that everybody can cure those things. We won't be the ones that'll make those drugs, but we'll collaborate with other people that will do it. So that's where I see the company going, is we will, have more money, which also helps you get through crises with less gray hair and stomach lining reduction. So I look forward to things getting a little bit easier for me personally, and for us broadening out our pipeline, and then going for the number one problem on earth that's touching all human beings, because if you don't get it yourself, somebody you love definitely will, and that is cancer.
Absolutely. I talked to you about my dad who beat it, thank God, the good Lord. Hey, Jeff, so outside your door I saw a framed photograph or print of DNA Valley. So you talked about maybe collaborating or using maybe some current competitors as partners in the future. Can you talk about the DNA Valley concept?
Well, I made my career in Silicon Valley, and there were a lot of attributes of Silicon Valley that made it expand and made it develop that industry so quickly. And I see all those same elements here driving the biotech revolution in gene and cell therapy. And so I believe that this place naturally has the capacity to become a Silicon Valley of DNA, hence DNA Valley. All right, now, how can we help power that? That's that whole idea of the tools, right? There's 7,000 monogenic diseases, and any professor...
What is a monogenic disease?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, since I just talk about these things like everybody knows what inherited diseases, right? You get a broken gene from both parents, and you're missing something in your body that can manifest itself as a disease because the lack of a protein or an enzyme that is useful in the activities of your body, right? That can be anywhere from inconvenient, lactose intolerant, to deadly, spinal muscular atrophy. With everybody knows lactose intolerance, right? Spinal muscular atrophy, these babies are born missing one gene that doesn't allow them, as a result, to form a normal spine and muscles around the spine, and they never can sit up, even lift their head, roll over, walk, and then eventually they aren't able to breathe on their own, and they die in ventilators by age 4. I mean, can you imagine? And that's just one broken gene. But you see, when you can crack open a virus, and when you can order genes over the internet now, that's how far this industry's come. And you can put that gene into a hollowed out viral particle, and you can infect that baby's spine and nervous system. Well, it turns out there's 12-year-olds running around playing baseball now that were born with spinal muscular atrophy. That's already been cured by gene and cell therapy. But we want to bring that revolution to 7,000 diseases that are causing a lot of suffering. Because when I say palliative treatments, I said, the world is spending about $2 to $4 trillion on palliative treatments for monogenic diseases, these inherited diseases. Because all you can do when you're missing a gene right now, for the most part, there's some exceptions where they do enzyme replacement for some of these diseases, but that's very expensive and painful also. But for the most part, all you can do is treat them daily for the symptoms until they die. And a lot of the symptoms can't be overcome. And so people suffer until they die. Like we have one drug that we're doing is phenylketonuria, and when people are born with that, they can't metabolize animal proteins, so they have to have a special diet their whole life long. But the problem is that those animal proteins would normally be broken down into things that are important to the brain. So even if they avoid animal protein and find protein somewhere else their whole life long, they still are likely to get depression, schizophrenia, and suicidal thoughts. 1 in 3 people with phenylketonuria commit suicide by age 40. So one gene, it's just one gene. Okay, so you crack open the virus, You order the gene off the internet, you pack it in the into the virus, and you infect the part of the body that needs that enzyme, and now they're essentially normal. It's just a gene replacement or a gene insertion. So that's the most obvious, simple thing to do with gene and cell therapy. There's a lot of details, there's a lot of engineering that has to go into making these things work, which is why they're not pouring out really, really fast. But we are making tools to make that easier right now. And so ultimately, I think, there's a drip of these miracle cures. There's a cure for blindness, Leber congenital amaurosis. People go blind in their early teens. Those people are now seeing again because they can take a couple drops of virus in the eye. But we can start seeing these miracle cures start coming out, like a steady stream of them, and then a deluge. And then pretty soon 7,000 monogenic diseases are gone, along with all their suffering, and you don't worry about if your baby's born with one of these things, because we just fix it right up.
It's amazing. So, you said this is DNA Valley, that this is like technology with genes. You mentioned Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, right, or Microsoft, and obviously people that invested early in those companies did really well. So what is the opportunity for people watching this to participate in some of the potential upside? What do you think that looks like, and how should somebody participate in this?
So we're a private company, so we can't even talk to anybody that's not what's called an accredited investor, which you can just look up on the internet. But it's a net worth issue, because you need to be a sophisticated person to look at private issues. So this is not a solicitation, and everything that I've said here are forward-looking statements.
Yes, I understand.
And I needed to say the normal disclaimers about that. But that's what we do. We've been running around, and when we meet high net worth individuals, we pitch the idea that they might want to invest some risk capital in this. And so we have about 800 entities on our cap table right now, and the law allows you like 2,000. So we still got plenty of room, and we're on the eve of a giant inflection point in the company, right? If we cure HIV, I think we'll get a good return on this, because even though we were just pursuing a cure for this, and we're trying to do something good, and we're struggling to stay in the game, if we achieve that, the value of it is immense.
And if we take the lens from AGT out to the biotech sector as a whole, do you feel the same way about the sector? Does the sector have the kind of upside that Silicon Valley saw back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s?
No question. I mean, my focus would be on gene and cell therapies. That's what I believe in. So I think what you've got right now is you've got a lot of very useful developments coming out of biotech all along the spectrum, from small molecules to large molecules to monoclonal antibodies to biologics, whatever. But these things are a little less direct in terms of how they operate on the body than going in there and reprogramming your DNA, and a lot of them can eventually be replaced by more effective therapies in gene and cell therapy. So what I expect to see happen is that over the long term, you're going to see the pharmaceutical industry morph into gene and cell therapy. So that's the future in my mind. Now, how big is that future? Well, Goldman Sachs predicts that it's a $5 trillion industry. Okay, going from nearly zero, 10 years ago, and probably not even being, more than is, I don't know, a few dozen billion, I don't know, right now. I don't know how big the industry is. We're spending a lot of money, but in terms of drug sales, it may not be off the charts yet. But I think Goldman Sachs' prediction is low. I think it's a $10 trillion industry. I think it starts with curing everything that kills us. And I think that almost everything is possible there. Everything in this industry gets twice as good every year at half the cost, like I was saying, and the over time, everything that you need will come along to do everything that you dream of, just like I saw in computers when I was back in Silicon Valley. So that's the future of this thing. So it starts by, curing everything that normally kills us and extends our life that way. Then it's the fountain of youth, because there's no reason why we can't, slow down or reverse aging in a lot of cases, and people will live longer feeling younger. And then with
Does everybody hear that?
Yeah.
That should make everybody watching this very happy.
And then regenerative medicine will make us like old Chevys down in Cuba, right? Where part goes bad, we just replace it. We can actually grow a new heart from a few good cells in your current heart. We can grow you a new heart that is your heart, not a transplant. It's so close and compatible that we're going to be able to replace every part of your body as necessary in order to extend you. And then one day, once we figure out how your personality and your mind is contained in your brain, even your brain will be able to be transplanted. Who knows? But this is a very interesting future that eventually gets into a whole bunch of policy and ethics issues. But right now, nobody can argue with the idea of like, hey, let's give relief to HIV infected individuals and make them normal, or let's cure cancer, or let's cure phenylketonuria. So right now, it is just like the most fun, incredible place to be, but the future is boundless. And your question about, biotech, oh yeah, we're at the beginning of a major revolution in pharmaceuticals that's going to grow that industry by 5 or 10x. And remember, it's already $1.6 trillion, right? So that's a lot of value creation.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the pharmaceutical companies have cash from vaccine sales, and maybe they'll be looking at some of these biotech companies. So maybe there's going to be some play in the purchases from some of these publicly traded pharmaceutical companies. So maybe the timing could be pretty good for people to look at biotech as an investment.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. The pharmaceutical companies tend to be very focused on first human efficacy. So any asset that's, sort of approaching first human efficacy where you believe that it is likely to work, like that's the problem with biotech is evaluating the data and even getting to all the data, right? If you're an outside investor. But, things that hit first human efficacy are within the model of pharma companies, and then that's always a big uptick in their valuation in an M&A transaction. And that would be true about any type of new chemical entity or biologic or anything coming out of biotech. And you just need to look at it, who's it strategic for, or how many bidders would there be on that asset, and then you can decide, okay, is this going to skyrocket or not, right? Because Pharmacet is just a nucleoside, so it's a little bit of an old technology, but John Martin spotted the fact that it was probably going to work, and he was willing to go all out to bring that into Gilead, and sure enough, he was right, and he started the hepatitis C cure spike, right? So, and that was huge amount of money to the bottom line, and if you'd been in Pharmacet, you would have got a great return, right, on that $11 billion M&A transaction. So yeah, there's a lot of life in that industry for sure.
So what is your exit plan?
Well, it's that we're going to split the company into the HIV company and take that public, or sell it off.
When might that happen, do you think?
Well, we need first human efficacy, so it's going to depend. Like if we get, say, 3 out of 7 patients that are in durable remission, I think that it's ripe for an M&A transaction. It's also sort of on the cusp of a really spectacular IPO. So that would be around the end of this year where we'd have that information, and then it takes time after that to engineer some sort of transaction, whether it's an IPO or whatever. But we're in touch with everybody. So in anticipation of good results, we're talking to all the bulge bracket banks and mid-tier banks and to all the usual suspects in the pharma industry. And, so hopefully we'll be able to do that transaction fairly quickly once we have the data to drive it. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed on that data.
It's hard to imagine you being retired. I guess you did it once, and then you came out and you've done all of this good. It's hard to imagine you on the beach with a metal detector and doing that for months on end. But what is one thing that's on your bucket list, Jeff, that you'd like to do personally?
Curing cancer.
Beyond
there isn't anything. There really isn't anything. I've done everything, right? Like even if we just cure HIV, right? Look, I'll die a happy guy, right? I'll feel like, okay, there was not anything I never got to do that was really important to me. And on top of that, I had this incredible fortune to be involved in something that was really positive, that left the world as, a little bit better place, right? And so I'm not thinking retirement. I'm not thinking about, seeing some place that I haven't seen yet, or I have no desire to get launched into outer space. Like, there's literally nothing that I can think of that I want to do besides continue this mission. And, I'm just hoping and praying that we're going to get the results in HIV, because that would drive tremendous amount of other good things that we can do here that I have complete confidence are going to follow the gene and cell therapy, and that I think we're in the lead on. And just that bolus of money that would come in from a positive transaction on the HIV asset would light the fuse on some amazing stuff, and that I wouldn't be able to imagine myself anywhere else but right there.
That's beautiful. We've been talking to Jeff Galvin, the CEO of American Gene Technology. Jeff, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.
That was really good.
How was it?
That was great.
I don't know if I might want to do the intro again.
Okay.
I think that might have been a little bit
Okay.
shaky, but
I thought it was pretty good,
questions
actually.
You didn't do. Do you want to do though? Try.
That was a good interview. You
I
didn't
think
miss
there's-
anything important.
I don't
Yeah.
think there's
I think we're having a tough time getting this done in 5 minutes.
No,
I'll
it's
tell you
not.
that.
But that's all right. I think this is great, and I just made up 5 minutes. So this
Yeah.
has got so much good stuff in it. I think people would want to.
I agree.
Listen,
I think
You know what you might want to do
It's
is, you could make a bunch of 5-minute clips that you sort of
Do it in
introduce that
pieces?
point back at the.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily launch it in pieces, because I don't think, like short 5-minute things aren't really enough for like a video series. But I would say that if you make some provocative clips from it, it's going to social media beautifully, and people will come back and watch a half-hour interview. That's not too long.
Yeah.
And that throwing out that wide net with anything that you find, even 5 minute, make a 5-minute video of something that was just like, oh wow, that was just off the charts interesting, or provocative,
the gene replacement stuff was like crazy to me though.
yeah, exactly. So that thing, make that a separate one, launch that separately, whatever, link in that to the full interview. If you want to see the full interview, it's here. I think you'll get a lot of traction.
Do you think it was good enough?
I think it was great.
All right.
Yeah,
mean-
I've been in a lot of interviews. I thought it was very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
a really wonderful host, and you're an amazing, guest. So.
Thanks. Yeah.
That was
No,
Wow.
we
And
had a
you
good
You
guys
should
rhythm.
go on the road.
Yeah.
We should. No, we had a great rhythm.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah, you did
Sorry
good,
for
good job
interrupting you there
interviewing.
in the middle.
Yeah, it was the only snafu was
Yeah,
Morgan.
It was me. It was
so
my fault.
as soon as you get far enough away from the building that we don't see it, you can go ahead and be heard. The Supreme Court says it's okay for you to do that now. Women don't have autonomy.
Oh, here we go. All right, let's go. Jeff and I are gonna
Get on him about that, because I know how he feels about all these things.
Not- you don't
So,
know exactly
say I
how.
do.
Actually, is I think.
I'm a little more middle than you.
You're
might
not.
think.
No. You're a moderate conservative. You're actually. See, all of us can get along, but there's extremes there that literally cannot get along with the rest, and there's extremes on the left too that have just lost all
But the
faith
extreme on the left
in
don't
government.
have power like the extreme on the right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, good point. Good
There's
point.
no
I
one
hadn't
in
really
power
summed it
that's
up that way,
extreme
but that's
left
true.
versus There's a
Yeah,
lot in power that
the
are
difference,
extreme
right?
so.
You do have a president that listens to the extreme left, but that's
yeah,
all
but
right.
he's not
Yeah,
leaning very
right.
far that
He
way.
is.
I'll show you.
Very
You want an
moderate.
extreme left president? Elect me.
You know
I'll
what's
make
sad?
AOC blush. She'll be like, "Well, I didn't mean to do it that quickly, but okay."
I just want some fiscal, responsibility is what I would love to see. Fiscal responsibility from either side. We don't have that.
I agree. But you
Politics.
see, you know how I feel? You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and so long as you have a plan and you're investing, I don't care about government spending. But when you're throwing it away on stuff like gifts to corporations
Oh yeah.
or billionaires, right? Okay, well that doesn't do anything in terms of investing for the future. You're never going to get a return on that money. And unfortunately, right, if you look at these, the liberal agendas, like the Green Plan, I know that people are like, knee-jerk reaction to that. But it's investments in technologies that will pay back.
Yeah. You just need to phase it.
Yeah.
It's just like defunding and things like that. You gotta
And
have a
defunding
plan.
was a very bad way of putting that. We should have reformed
Yeah.
and improved policing, because it needs more diversity. Not, I mean, in terms of the background of the police officers, but they have to learn to handle a lot of different situations that sometimes a gun or a taser doesn't help you, right?
It's I saw in where the heck was it? It might have been Queens or someplace where they have these. Somewhere they got rid of the police with guns. They have the ambassadors that are in there, but they have no. Be hard to, like, a lady got shot today in New York.
I heard about that. Right in
Rolling
the
her
head.
baby down that street.
Yeah.
You're not gonna. Ambassador's not gonna stop that.
But let's, there's a real danger, and we avoid this as scientists, the N equals 1 syndrome or the small sample syndrome, right? Because we tend to overreact to horrifying stories like this, and that's why terrorism works, because it grips our heart and makes us irrational, and the next thing we do is shoot ourselves in the foot. And I think that sort of sums up the history from 9/11, all the way through the Bush presidency, that we made the situation worse. You don't win hearts and minds by dropping bombs on them, right?
No.
So what you do is you mint more terrorists. So and this plan to reshape the Middle East and control it, was kind of a fool's errand, and it was expensive. And if you want to look at all the fiscal irresponsibility,
Well,
right?
that's up there. The
It's
second
up
Iraq
there.
War was way up there as far as
Yeah.
ridiculous spending of money, weapons of mass destruction
that weren't
wasn't
there.
proved.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Involvement with 9/11 that was totally debunked, all that stuff. And the whole concept of, well, if we don't fight them over there, we'll have to fight them over here. And I'm like, really? Does Iraq have a flotilla? I mean, they are landlocked. Are they all going to get into one rowboat and come over here and cause us a hassle? I think the Coast Guard can handle them. I'm not too worried. We are so powerful. We have to be really judicious and strategic in the way we apply it. And but otherwise we are our own worst enemy. Nobody has the power to hurt us like we do to hurt ourselves.
No, and they're just laying back, our adversaries, and watching us just like take all our energy and fight each other.
That's
it's
right.
It's a bloodless civil war going on right now. Right?
Yeah. But you see how we can get along, right? Like you and I, our views aren't so far apart that we couldn't come up with policies and compromises where we could actually live together. But that's not what's going on in Congress right now. And it's not what's going on between red and blue, right? Because the issue is the Senate. The Senate should be elected on a ratio the same way that the Congress is. Because it is ridiculous that 40 million people in California get the same say as 1 million people in Wyoming about literally everything.
Well, that's why they did it the way. One's based on representation, and these states wouldn't have, these low populous states would not have gone into it. So they had to compromise to get the deal done.
But they're
the
in
first place.
now, and things have been really distorted. We didn't have a gargantuan Texas and a gargantuan California when they came up with this compromise. And also senators
they had
used to
little
be,
Delaware, they had a little, right? It was like Virginia and Massachusetts basically had the power, and then these other colonies did not.
Right.
So the other colonies said, screw that, unless we have this 2-person Senate, we're not going forward with this deal.
Yeah, I don't know the exact history of that, but I also know that senators used to be appointed by the governor or something,
yeah.
and then they became elected, which I think was a big improvement. But I think that, for instance, we should just say, okay, look, once you have 20 million people, you can be a new state, right? And we should have California North and California South, and they'll have 4 senators, and they'll have more reasonable say. Or maybe the number's 10 million. I don't know what it is. Like there's what do we have in senators? 100 senators, right? So we have 100 for 300 million, which means that every 3 million. So, let's be realistic here. For California to have 2, they might be off by about a factor of 10 in terms of what would be reasonable for their influence on their own lives. That's the concept of democracy, right? As we strike compromises based on popularity. And we also have, sort of constitutional protections for the minority. But that's what we need to use that for.
So when we were talking earlier about sort of, the origin of the universe and life and so forth, and you say, well, we can't figure that all out, so it's kind of a waste of time. The same thing, there's no chance Republicans are going to allow California to have more senators. They're like, nah, I've seen Dianne Feinstein. That's enough for me.
Well, just like in science, anything's possible, and we have to have faith. And we also need to be committed to some basic parameters of collaboration and good behavior, right? And so, look, I don't think that we're going to change the Senate real fast. But I think there's a lot of stuff that can be done to restore civility and to find compromise and start working together again. And part of that may be that, with all of the trauma and drama that the Republican Party is going through, that they make some decisions about, sort of reforming themselves, right? To, try to limit their membership, right? If the whole idea is like, we'll take anybody so long as they vote Republican, that isn't going to lead to good. And you're going to start getting a schism in the party itself, which I think is already happening.
Yeah, you have it. You have it in the Democrat Party too, because you have a lot of people that really, there were blue dog Democrats back in the day, and when you look at I did my own test, and I'm like in the middle. One of those tests, like you're either authoritarian or you're either like towards socialism or you're towards this side, and I'm like,
right. That's why we get along
here, right here. But then you have to decide. All right, I got really two choices, and I got to decide of all of these things, what am I going to put up with that sucks, if it's for the things that I care about. And everybody.
Oh, the Democratic Party needs to get better too. But I think that they're right. At the moment, I would say that the Republican Party is causing more trouble for society than the Democratic Party. I mean, it's a power thing.
Well, she'll agree with you.
Yeah, and that's why I'm looking over there, because she made a really good point, which is the tactics on the right are, and not just the power that they have, but how they're exercising it is totally lopsided versus the way the Democrats exercise their power.
Democrats had the FISA warrants. They had the Russia thing. They made this stuff up. They put, Trump was a dick, but there was a lot of tactics that went on there that are just.
Are you watching the January 6th proceedings?
I don't. Yeah. I just watch. I like.
You watch the review on Fox News.
And listen, man. No, I don't.
Yeah. I know. I'm only laughing because I watch the Fox News also, and I'm like. Wait a minute, that doesn't look anything like the I watch the actual hearings myself so I can hear it myself and draw my conclusions. Then I watch MSNBC emphasize everything that's on the left, and I think that, it's distorted. And then I go over to Fox and I'm like, what planet were they listening to?
Well, Jeff, I could say the same thing when CNN was saying, hey, these are mostly peaceful protests, and there was like $20 billion in damage, 1,500 police officers that were hurt during that summer of riots.
Which summer riots was that?
2020, when you had all of those George Floyd protests going on all across the country, in Seattle and these places. They were, burning buildings. They burnt down police stations, burnt cars. All of these things happened, and the left let that go. But then they're looking at January 6th. I look at
the left let that go. That was the Republicans controlled everything back then. Where was it? When 2020 was Trump's term.
Yeah.
Trump actually was shooting people in Portland. He was having people protecting the courthouse from graffiti, actually shooting rubber bullets at protesters, and unmarked cars with unmarked people arresting people in the street. This is the point, is that the rules that we need to decide, that we need to all adhere to, is transparency and some sort of limits on the exercise of power that are democratic. And the problem, that I see, I saw this under Bush too, is that it was the first time where protesters didn't ever get anywhere near the president, right? Because in previous administrations, the president had to see the protesters, the people that didn't like him also. But in the Bush years, he could actually be isolated from that. In the Trump years, they just didn't care. They didn't hear anything that was contrary. This guy had an image in his head of how the world was and should be.
Yeah, I didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
Some I did agree with, some I didn't. I definitely did not agree with how he comported himself. But, anyway, it's, where the real problem is? The real problem is that the power is with these big corporations and these politicians, and the average person, it's like that Citizens United decision just put.
That was the end of it. Yeah.
There's too much money in the system, and there's too many.
See, once again, we can agree on it, right? See, if I could be dictator of the United States, for a year, the first thing I would do.
You should have said that's what's next.
Right, I know. Well, you see, this is, dictators can change things quickly, right?
You gotta go.
No, I don't need to go. No, it's just telling me, it's congratulating me on the fact that I have been exercising today because I've been moving my arms when I'm talking, which is really hilarious, right? Because I haven't been exercising. But the getting money out of government would be the number one fix. What I would do is I would say zero money in government. And I mean absolute zero. You would apply the same rules to Congress and the president and anybody in politics or anybody in our institutions that we apply to NIH scientists. If somebody buys them a lunch that's worth more than $15, they can be fired. Mm-hmm. And I think we ought to just apply that to Congress and go, yeah, that's a violation of campaign, rules. If you do anything financial for anybody, no more PACs, none of that stuff. All publicly financed campaigns. You get enough signatures, you get a tranche of money. You get to a certain percentage, you get another tranche of money.
I agree.
I wrote a paper just literally exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
In college.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's exactly what's needed.
You get the
Get the corporate money out.
Yeah.
It's
get the billionaires out of it. Get the corporations out of it. Make it so that even red Republicans have to reflect the sensibilities of the people that they represent, right? Because you can't manipulate them anymore. Right? You can't choose your voters by distorting everybody's beliefs with money and false messaging, really. And you're allowed to say anything in a campaign? That's ridiculous. There should be some sort of truth in advertising law in campaigns as well. It should be looser than, just saying that your product, is FDA approved to save your life.
The real problem is you got a lot of really ignorant voters, and so they
can be manipulated.
They're easily manipulated. They don't know enough. They spend their time watching American Idol or whatever they're doing, and they're not
or
looking at the issues or CNN or MSNBC or
anything. You know that Fox, when Tucker Carlson was sued, and Fox, in their defense, part of their defense was no reasonable person would
believe that.
Would think that this is news. This is
news or facts.
This is entertainment purposes only.
That was his defense when he got sued.
But I think there's a lot of news people that it's like, I look at Joy Behar. You can't tell me that she is some kind of
but she's on The View. That's the difference between.
Yeah.
They say Tucker is not news. That's opinion, right? So there's news and there's opinion.
Well, there's opinion and there's fact-free opinion. He's in the fact-free opinion.
Brett Baer, he puts facts in there, but he spins it
Brett
his
Baer's
way.
pretty good, actually.
Brett Baer's
and,
that's news.
Who's
Chris Wallace.
Chris Wallace is fantastic.
I thought he left Chris Wallace.
He did.
Yeah, did he? Yeah.
He left.
How could he survive there, really?
Yeah.
Where did he go?
He went to CNN, and then they were going to have CNN Plus. CNN's lost so many viewers that Plus folded. So but they're going to get Chris a different.
Because Chris is a good newsman.
Yeah.
And to me, he was the pillar of sanity at Fox. Like if something got repeated with Chris Wallace, it was pretty darn close to what I was hearing on MSNBC minus their spin, right? I mean, he was.
How about Chris Cuomo? I mean, come on.
No,
There's
no,
like
no.
a bunch of dumbasses on both sides.
Chris
He was
Cuomo,
terrible, and
yeah.
he
No,
was.
I'm complimenting, that particular Fox host. I'm not saying Chris Cuomo because he has the same first name is is somehow equivalent.
No, he's not. I'm just saying there are plenty of people on both sides that all they're doing is they're catering to these, and that's part of the problem.
That's what it is the
what
money in news.
Is what we've had is I would posit that there are equal knuckleheads on both sides that don't care about truth. What they care about is they just want to have their opinion. It's like scientists
I think it's
scientists that take data and they skew it to make it seem like whatever it is that they want the outcome to be, and they're really not impartial. And I think most people are like that. They just, especially when it comes to politics, it's so emotional that people will bullshit, they will lie, they will skew, they will do all of these things.
But also you've got, bias reinforcement happening too, because you're able to, with algorithms the way they are, people are not seeing, myself included. So in the 2020 to Trump era, even before he was president, I unfollowed every single person that was a Trump person and was posting crazy Trump stuff. In my eyes, crazy. Unfollowed. I didn't want to unfriend people, but unfollow. I don't even want to see you in my newsfeed. So I curated my Facebook to essentially be reinforcing what I already believe, because I unfollowed anybody that's going to be posting things
That's why I like
are
having these
against my
conversations.
opinion.
If you have it in a respectful way, you learn. And when you learn, you can change your own opinion. And you
these
should be able
conversations are
to
important.
you should be able to change your opinion. And now, because people can't even have a conversation, so
And they get mocked for changing their opinion too.
Right.
Yeah, it's
like,
crazy.
well, you used
No,
to
it's a
think
crazy
this.
world,
Well,
social media.
You learn, and
social media is terrible, right? Social media.
Well, it's like every technology. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And the problem is that technology advances faster than human evolution, and so we are constantly caught on our back foot. As new things come along, and Cambridge Analytica can find a little crack in the system and exploit it, and we get Brexit and Trump. They pushed both of those things, and they did it in a really clever way with micro-targeting that only became possible because of the proliferation of Facebook, the amount of information it was gathering, and the fact that they were either given it or they could steal it and then use it for whatever purpose would pay them the most money, right? So, we, once again, money, won the day in both those things. I think most people around the UK are not really happy with the consequences of Brexit, although I'm sure there's still plenty of arguments about it. And
right after it happened, everyone's like, how did this happen?
Right.
Kind of like
What
when Trump
happened
was
be-
elected, they're like, how did this happen? Not enough of the other side went out and,
we didn't take it
Just because
seriously
you didn't
enough.
take it too seriously, because you're like,
Well,
no
part
way
of the
is
part of the
this,
messaging was to lull you into that complacency, because if you didn't micro-target as a potential voter, they targeted you as somebody that might stay home.
There was Brexit because the people in England, those people didn't want Brussels people to be controlling decision making in their country, right?
Yeah,
So
same reason why we can't get along in the United States, because states don't want people in Washington telling them what to do, or scientists telling them about science that that implies that they have to do something for other people, right? Why do we wear seatbelts? Why do we, the same reason that we wear masks, why do we only drive 60 miles an hour on the highway? So that it's not a wasteland of people killing themselves and killing other people by accident, right? The exact same thing.
Well,
this is the issue.
part of
Freedom doesn't exist. And, but democracy does, and collaboration, and we can put some decent limits.
But you're putting a science argument on one argument, which is the masking argument, which I understand. But then there's the monoclonal antibody. There is the science of natural immunity that people were saying that doesn't even matter. Neither of those things. You cannot. We
I'll
don't
send
focus
you.
on
I'll send you an
treatments.
article. Vaxes saved more people than died.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah. So vaccines
I'm not
are
opposed to that.
absolutely established as reducing
I'm not
the
opposed
morbidity.
to that.
Right.
But then there are other things that can help. If you get COVID,
Yes,
you
but
could have taken
when
therapy.
you're part of the network that passes it on, because a lot of the people that were saved by vaccines didn't take the vaccine because they couldn't even take the vaccine. They were immunocompromised, but they didn't get exposed. And they didn't get exposed because even though we didn't reach herd immunity, we had a higher level of immunity that reduced the spread. See, this is the thing, is that we have to cooperate on stuff, and we have to be willing to make small sacrifices in our freedoms to protect our neighbors, who
Yeah,
we
I
should
see
love like we love
I
ourselves,
see
and
that.
all the people that are out there pounding their chest about, God bless America and Jesus is on our side, should listen to the New Testament about how we should feel about one another.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't disagree with that position at all.
Okay.
So
Yeah, see, you're a moderate. I'm telling you, we could settle things. You, me, we could co-dictate the world
support
and
it.
get
I
rid
vote
of,
for that
and we
too.
would get rid of
John, you're
money in
John, you're
politics.
picky, though.